Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, I honestly, really, truly believe that when my guests, all of the folks that show up, all of us, we have a couple of things that I consider very, very special. Time, very expensive commodity. If not used correctly, which a lot of people don't, before you know it, it's gone. But I want to thank you, Melissa, for coming and spend some of that quality with us. The other is your journey. It houses pain. It houses beauty. It houses victory. It houses insight. It houses you. And we want to thank you for coming and sharing yourself with us so that we can get to know this beautiful human spirit that is before us, that we in turn may learn to become better human spirits while we occupy this beautiful place called Earth. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Ken. I feel emotional as we start. I feel that there's already just a sacred energy here between us and that there's a lot of beautiful things that are going to come from this conversation. And I'm feeling that already. And I'm so grateful to be here with you.
Thank you so much. I want you to tell the people the things that you have given birth to, because through the journey, we learned a few things about ourselves, and then we put it in a format by which we can serve. And talk to the people about those things that you have given birth to, by which you're currently serving.
Thank you. Yeah, I am a speaker, life coach, and mentor for women. And my current mission on this earth is to help women who are feeling lost and overwhelmed by life changes to find clarity and build confidence so they can step into that next chapter of their lives with renewed purpose and freedom. And the primary way I help women with that is through my one-on-one coaching program. It's called Braving the Unknown, 12 Weeks to Confidence, Clarity, and Stepping into the Next Chapter of Your Life. And it really is such an honor for me to walk alongside women as they we talked about this before our interview, peel away the layers of conditioning and programming that we have to find their truest self and chase after what they really want. And my unique interest is helping women navigate relationship dynamics as they transition into a new season, because we are in a world that is increasingly divisive. And if you're not on my team, then I want nothing to do with you. And I'm particularly passionate about helping women develop those skills to navigate the trickiness, right, of when we don't hold the same worldview or opinion as another person. And I'm very passionate about, if this is a relationship you want to be in and it's healthy, let's figure out how to stay in it. And a lot of times it's looking within. And so I really love working with women on that. I also have a free journal guide that I'd love to offer to your listeners. It's 30 minutes to disarming fear and taking action. Mm-hmm. And that's a method that I use myself, looking within, seeking answers from within, from spirit, whoever guides you, and learning to really take an honest look and examine on what's holding me back and disarming that and being able to move forward.
That is a noble profession, if you will. And I love the things that you said. And I cannot wait to unpack those, because within what you have described houses a great deal of information that I want to have access to. As we do here at Threads of Enlightenment, our custom is to go back. We want to deconstruct this beautiful journey that you had. After mom and dad brought you home from the hospital, as I mentioned to you on the onset, you had your first traumatic experience when mom was giving birth to you. And then they brought you into the house and they began to input into you their perception, the values that they deemed necessary for you to assist you while you are moving through this life. Talk to us about your family life. How was that?
Well, I was the first child, first grandchild, first niece and nephew. I like to say I was also the best, but that's just my opinion. But because I was the first, I was, I think, really, right, this is our first, and it was so exciting, and it was so special. And I look back, I've recently been digitizing old home videos, and there was something really exciting about the first little baby, right, coming into even the larger family unit.
Yeah.
And I was really celebrated, and every accomplishment was exciting. And we'll see if we circle back to that later, because I think that gave me quite a complex, right, about needing everything to be perfect and wonderful. Yeah. And but I grew up in Southern California, and I feel very grateful for what I had growing up. You know, money was tight, and yet I can think back and remember that I really wanted for nothing, and my parents really worked hard to provide for us. We grew up evangelical Christian, so I always say from the moment I popped out of the womb, I was in church. And that was something that was important to our family, and we went pretty religiously. I do recall growing up.
Did you do Wednesday night?
Oh,
Did
yeah.
you do all day Sunday? All day Sunday.
Not all day Sunday. We would, but usually there was going to service in the morning and then spending time with friends from church in the afternoon.
And you didn't go back for Sunday evening?
No.
Oh man, I need to talk to your pastor, because we were there early. I grew up in the same thing as well. Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, we got home, we recouped, we went back Sunday evening, went back Wednesday night, and of course Friday night for youth group. So yeah, girl, we were there all day. Yeah, all
that's
week. Oh man,
impressive commitment. Yeah, definitely there was youth group during the week, and you know, a lot of people, when I share my story of that I left this system, people always ask, was it your parents who really were kind of pushing you in the direction of this religion? And I always say, honestly, it's yes and no. Yes, was I introduced into the system from my parents? Absolutely. And we went as a family. But as I got older into junior high and high school, I was really the one that wanted to go all the time. I wanted to do all the events and go to all the youth group services. And I am a pretty black and white person when it comes to my personality. I like to know right and wrong, and I want things to be very clearly defined. And so I think I was naturally very drawn to evangelical Christianity, because they do that, right? There's truth, and there's false, and there's good, and there's evil, and we're going to spell out all the ways that are right to live in the world and all the ways that are wrong to live in the world. And we know the truth and other people don't. And I really gravitated towards that and loved it. And I wanted to be good. That's my primary impetus in the world, is to do good, to be seen as good, to be thought of as good. And so, man, evangelical Christianity was the place for me, because they said, this is how you do it. This is how you achieve that.
I must have been somewhere in the church, because they considered me the bad boy. I was a black sheep, man. I don't know what happened to me.
I really wanted to be seen as good. I really wanted to be on the straight and narrow. Being seen as the black sheep came later, as I got into college and after. I decided that I wanted to become a missionary. And so I went to a conservative evangelical university, and I majored in Bible and theology. Was in deep. I went all in. So we're going to do this thing. And I can look back now and see that even in college, I was really struggling. I mean, that is when things really started to be difficult internally and emotionally in ways that I certainly didn't understand until I left. I was always a leader everywhere I went. And in college, they decided to start this new program where seniors were student resident directors. So you have an adult staff who's a resident director of a dorm. They decided that they wanted to do student RDs. And I think that is not a good idea. That's a lot to put on a student who's already going through so much when you're in college. And I really struggled with having friends who, looking back, were navigating totally normal questions and complexities in college, right?
Mm-hmm.
And why are we being forced to go to chapel for a certain amount of times? A friend was writing a paper where they critiqued things at the school. It was this short kind of newsletter that they would distribute anonymously. And I decided to help them distribute it. I wasn't a contributor, but I said, yeah, we should question things and we should talk about what's wrong. And I came under a lot of heat. I remember sitting in offices and they were like, you need to tell us who's writing this. And just, I mean, they did not like me for that at all. And so even though I didn't leave my faith till, a decade later, I can look back and see, wow, you were pushing against the system and you were really not okay with some of this very dogmatic, heavy-handed behavior that are in certain places. I want to be sure to say I don't think all religious communities are like this. I think the ones I happened to find in college and after college were particularly harmful in that way, that freedom of thought and questioning were not welcome.
Well, I think I grew up in that system. I came out of Christianity, if you will. And the evangelical, I believe, have lost their way. Because the Bible says, come, let's reason together. Mm-hmm. That's a God that is inviting you to bring all of your questions.
Right.
I mean, that verse alone, come, let's reason. That, to me, tells us that we ought to be having this exchange. And I argue with God. I say, I don't like this. I don't like this. And I plead my case. But I get it where I like my relationship with him because he sees the picture, the wholeness of it. I don't. I see part of it. The part that I see and I feel, I plead my case. And I come out and when we're finished, and he gives me answers and shows me the answers, and then I investigate it and I go and I say, I could see that. But it also says, Melissa, that traditions of man make the word of God of none effect. And most of the people that stood and critiqued Jesus and fought with him were all the religious folks. So I questioned them too. My pastor preached about jewelry wrong and all kinds of stuff like that. And the next week, I would show up with a pound of jewelry. It doesn't make any sense to talk about nonsense like that as far as external things. Talk to us about the things that are spiritual, the deep things. Who am I from the inside? And religion, I think, most religious system is designed to control. It's another part of the apparatus to control us and to keep us, as I said earlier, normal. This is how you ought to behave. It can be dogmatic and very hurtful. And a lot of people, Melissa, are crushed on it daily. Every day I've seen a ton of it myself. So I totally get where you were and you're coming from because I've seen it. I was one of those that got brutalized by the religious system, and I left. And I studied a lot of religion, different other religions, and it opened my eyes to certain different things. The dogma of religion is not what the Bible is about. And but yeah, I went to Bible school and all that good stuff.
Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that. It was interesting as you started talking and sharing and even saying that you feel that the evangelical tradition has lost its way. I felt my body physically, I don't know if you could see, just let go. There's still, even now talking about it years after having left, there's still this internalized, like, no, you can't critique it. No, you can't say it's wrong. No, you can't say it's hurtful. And I could feel even in this conversation, I just needed that permission to say, yes, there's truth and validity to my story and to my experience, because even today, the majority of my family, immediate and larger, are still in that system. And it is not acceptable to speak that way about God or this belief system. And I just appreciate you validating that. No, that harm and that trauma and that spiritual abuse is very real. And there are a lot of people even today currently experiencing that very real reality.
I've lived it. So
Yeah.
when you were talking about it, I could sense the fact that you were apprehensive about speaking truth in that situation, and I get it because I grew up there. But here we speak truth. Truth will set you free. It changes your perception of what you're holding on to when truth enters in. What we hold on to is facts. The truth supersedes facts. So speak your truth because it is who you are and where you came from. And when you express that, people that are listening outside, once they hear this, will identify with it because they're in it. We're people that are in it currently, Melissa, are going to need your truth. So let them know about your pain and how did you overcome the pain. And we're going to go into all of that, but speak to the pain because the pain is real. It hurts. It's deep. It needs to be released. And as we release them through conversation, we heal deeper. We get a little deeper in our healing, and we kind of get bolder with our stands and our belief, our current new belief system. But it is corrupted to the core. I grew up in it. I was a pastor. I can tell you stories that will freak you out. But and I differentiate Western Christianity through Eastern Christianity because Eastern Jesus was Christianity. The original intent was an Eastern religion, and when we took over it at the Nicaea Council and we dissected it, we destroyed it, and we changed it to a different format so that we can control members. The original intent was never about having members. It was about discipleship. So when you change the outcome and you want members now, you want to control how they live, how they speak, where they go, who they're friends with, who they're not friends with. All of these things, that's what you do to members. But a disciple is the type of person like you that have the question, because the disciples came to Jesus all the time with questions. Every time he came to them, they came to him was, what did you mean by that? And Jesus would say, I told them parables, but I'm going to tell you guys the deep stuff. And that was the exchange. He expected the questions. If you look at the questions that the religious people came to ask, was never pure. It was always about how you differ from us because we are able to control them this way. Why are you teaching them that? So be truthful because it is a corrupt system. It's moved away from its original intent, and when you move away from your original intent or your mission statement, you've lost your way. That's in any business.
Right.
Any individual. When you move away from your mission statement, you've lost your way. This is how it is. So here we go. I'm excited about this conversation, by the way. So here you are. You are in college. You got through high school, and you got into college, and you began to look at these, and you had the dichotomy within you. And you began to write secretly, I love it anyway, and critique or express your true feelings about their religious system. And they now are investigating, pushing you. What did you do as they began to push you to inquire who is doing this? And how did you manage yourself and with your relationship with them? And how did you manage yourself, dealing with yourself?
I'll admit it was quite thrilling to be part of something so secretive, top secret, and causing quite a stir, if I'm honest, about that part. That was an incredibly painful season, that last year of college, because studying theology in particular really opened my eyes up in ways that I had never had before. Something as simple as I remember sitting in a world religions or world cultures class, and the professor describing how people in other parts of the world, just their perception of the divine was different than mine. That literally blew my mind, Ken. It had never occurred to me that you could think of God in your mind in a way that was different to mine.
Yeah.
And so I was having a little bit of this crisis. We were studying all these big theological ideas like atonement theory. And I said, well, which one's right? But which way's the right way to think about the crucifixion or whatever the topic was? And it really messed with me because, remember, I like to just know the right way. And I was also struggling as a leader with friends in the dorm, and they were, again, it was a close friend that was writing in this newsletter. And why can't we question these things? And why can't we say that we're deeply unhappy with the chapel policy, or what? I think it was more of what was being said and what was going on the stage in that regard. And I was really struggling to navigate all of these relationships and enforcing things in the dorms that I felt were unreasonable or harmful. And it got so bad, to be perfectly transparent, I was very close to suicide. There was one night in particular that was really scary. And that is how deeply I was struggling with this, just this battle inside of me where I could not reconcile with what I was experiencing. And I think it was because I really couldn't, there wasn't a clear answer in my mind. I couldn't hold what I was experiencing and what I was supposed to believe, I guess. Right. And that was a dark time. And I made it through. I almost left my leadership position, but I felt that would be a disservice to the women that I was serving and the staff that were supporting me. And when I graduated, I think all of the questioning that I had, I wasn't, other than participating in this little secretive newsletter, I did not actually at that time allow myself to really question. Like, that just was not, that didn't feel safe to me. And so I actually went the other way and got even more fundamentalist. I clung even tighter to this belief system. I really got into Calvinist teachings, right? Which is even more kind of black and white and harsh. And when I moved from college, I moved to this little coastal town on the Oregon coast where I spent the next decade. And I found an evangelical Christian community that I describe as cult-like. And they did that, right? It was very black and white and strict as to what was okay and what was not okay. So when I look back at that season of time where I had that really intense year in college where I was wrestling, my body chose to go even deeper into it. It felt so unsafe, right? To actually give voice to questions or name harm that I was seeing or whatever I was experiencing, that I clung even tighter. I got even more judgmental and strict with my belief system. And I think when I reflect on those years, excuse me, what brings me the most pain, Ken, is the harm that I caused to other people. Again, I was a leader wherever I went. And so when I facilitated groups or studies or mentored women, which I had a passion for, obviously I still do. There was a lot that I said and did that was trying to get these women to fit inside that box like me. And that's what was right. And that's what was safe. And I have since attempted to reconcile with those relationships, which looks like apologizing and owning my part in that. But I think that's a particular pain that people have leaving evangelical Christianity, is how they were complicit in exercising harm on other people. And that's difficult to live with. I'm happy to say, as I say that to you, I actually don't feel a lot of angst or shame in my body, because I think I have reckoned with that piece. But it is something that I really had to work through when I first left.
Yeah, I'm sure, because guilt can be something else. I had to deal with that. It can take you to the road of suicide. I had those thoughts, and guilt is a dark place to be. It keeps you in cages, if you will. And I had to learn how to release myself from it. And how do you do that? I went and I sought out forgiveness. Forgiveness is a powerful thing. For the person who is exercising and going to do that, there's a thing called freedom. It keeps you in a cage if you allow it. There's a scripture in the Bible where Jesus says about, he's teaching his disciples about casting the mountain into the sea, and by their words and their belief system and so forth. And he tells them, he says, if you come to the Father and you didn't forgive someone, shut up, stop praying, go and forgive them and come back, because your Father said, if you don't forgive them, I'm not going to forgive you. So there's a reciprocal relationship that God has with his people, and he wants us to grow up. And he says, pick up your cross and follow me, but I'll be there with you. And picking up our cross is where we have to deal with some of those things that we have done. And I had to do the very same thing. And freedom is a beautiful thing when you get to that other side. And when the people see you coming and you are being humble and seeking forgiveness, there is nothing like it for both parties. And once you've done that, Melissa, and you're free from that, the thoughts will always come back. That's what its purpose are there for, to come back. But your purpose as one that have gone through that is to say thank you, but no thank. I am not that person anymore. I am not that person. And so I tell this example to people. When I had to deal with my demons, if you will, I remember creating because I was a pastor, got divorced, left the church because at that time I felt I had nothing to give, and it would be irresponsible for me to stay in that position, because you just don't do that in my belief system. And I remember having to deal with all the guilt. And one day I cooked a meal and I put plates out and I called them all guilt, all of the different demons that I had. And I invited them to dinner. I had a conversation with each and every one of them, every one of them. When I got finished from that dinner appointment, I told them, I said, thank you so much for serving me for this long in my life. But I desire to go a little deeper to find out who I am. Mm-hmm. And I do appreciate all that you've done for me so far. I will never need you anymore. And I thank you for your service. Goodbye. That was the last time I ever felt any guilt about anything, or I was afraid of certain things, because it was an exercise I felt that I needed to do for me. And it helped me because I'm part of my mind, and how I think is visual. So when I did that, I was able to exercise those demons, if you will, and began a new path of my life. And so the thoughts come, and I would say to them, oh, I haven't seen or heard from you for a long time. Well, goodbye. I have no need for you. I still have no need for you. And I will continue my thing. But beautiful. It's designed to come all the time because we are alive. We are still here. But because of our growth, we no longer give them permission to sit at the table. We have different guests at the table. Guests of forgiveness. Guests of love. Guests of empathy. These are the guests that we're sitting down with, and we have allowed into our space, that we have let the others go. And so we have these guests, and we are now learning different principles from these guests that will now guide us to the different degrees and different paths in our life. So here you are, young lady. You are this rebellious little thing. You are excited. You are challenging everyone. And you went down into, as you stated, another cult. You know what it is? You're just going to places that feels familiar. And so now here you are, you're in this place and you saw the pain. Talk to me, Melissa, as to how did you begin? First, how did you recognize what you were doing, that little revelation that walked in, that little light that came into your space one day and illuminate your behavior? How was that when it entered in, and what did you do?
Yeah, it's funny. I forget. Excuse me. I forget. I really was seen as a little rebellious thing. At the time, I was thinking, okay, but this is just common sense. What they didn't like in that particular cult-like community was my voice and my leadership and my pushing back and saying, this is not okay and that's not okay. And they were very happy to have me literally for 3 years. I did this every single Sunday. I got there early before anyone was ever there. I set up the sanctuary. I did audio and sound and media. And I got there before the worship team got there, and I set up the microphones. And every Sunday I served in that capacity and cleaned up afterwards. And they were very happy to have me do that. But they were not happy to have me have any kind of real leadership voice, right, in that community. I remember starting at my home every other week, a Taco Tuesday, where the young adult group would get together. And one of the pastors had to like sit me down over coffee and say, I just need you to like tell me about that, because I need to give you permission essentially to do that. And it wasn't, I mean, it was connected to the church in that I let people at the young adult group, but even at that time, right, I can recognize like, are you joking? I can't even feed people tacos because I might pray or say something that's close to teaching, which was not acceptable if you were a woman. So I was in that community for 7 years, and I saw a lot of really horrible things. Near the end, I was involved in something particularly horrible where I was manipulated by a deacon's wife who was mentoring me, and she used her power over me to triangulate me, to try to fault a pastor for some inappropriate behavior. And so she used my relationship to him to kind of dig in, and it became this really horrible thing where one of my closest friends at the time was involved, and it was incredibly horrible and painful. And that's, I think, really where I started thinking, this is, wow, I was completely like, because this person was in quotes authority over me as a mentor, and she's telling me the right thing to do, and don't you think, and isn't this kind of weird? And over the course of a couple of weeks really like shaped my thinking to be something that I would have never even considered before. Essentially what happened was the pastor's son, there was 2 campuses. He took over our campus. And as a Bible and theology student, I was taught that there were certain basic hermeneutical principles, and that hermeneutics is, hermeneutics is like how you approach interpreting scripture, quote unquote, correctly or incorrectly. And I struggled with his preaching because it was very opinion based. He didn't have any kind of training or real life experience outside of this tiny town. And I struggled with that because I felt that this person was standing on a platform with the authority of God and teaching his opinions to people. And I didn't feel he was being truthful or honest to like actually what scripture was saying. Which of course now I'm like, well, who does? I don't know. But to answer your question, what happened was I decided to give him a year. I was really struggling with his preaching style, and I said, I'm going to give him a year before I leave. And the very last Sunday I ever attended, so this was a church community I had spent 7 years in. I mean, my ties were deep in that community. I sat there and he said, the reason I believe that the Bible says women can't teach men is because their emotions cloud their ability to interpret scripture correctly, and that men are clear-headed and logical, and thus they can interpret scripture correctly. Rage is not an accurate word to describe
That's
the feeling that I had. And to be honest with you, at the time, it wasn't because he was saying men can teach and women can't. I knew that. Like, I knew that's the position that they held. But it was the way in which he said it, which was, I knew just biologically and like psychologically wrong, right? It's not that women are emotional than men. Men are conditioned to suppress their emotions and not feel them. Like,
Yeah.
that's not even a true statement. And I also knew many couples in the congregation that morning where the woman had more of that masculine role in the relationship or masculine energy. And I thought, how incredibly shaming, right? To that man. I was honestly thinking about the man's perspective. Maybe they are the more sensitive, emotional one in the relationship, and to hear that there's only one right way to be. And I was so upset at him teaching his opinion, and an opinion that I felt was grossly ignorant and uneducated. And I said, no more. It was just that little action alone was enough. Again, this was after a year of like torturous teachings that I was struggling with. And the act alone of physically stopping, going to this place was all it took. That's all it took. There was a podcast that I had discovered a couple years before, The Liturgists. Some of your listeners might be familiar. And at the time when I listened to them, I was like, oh gosh, these progressive Christians, I can't listen to them. They are just out there. They're really out there. And I came back to them after I left. I don't remember how. And all it took was listening to this podcast where they challenge and question these things, but I was listening, not physically in that space, right? And having my body physically removed was all it took. And you know, I've listened and talked to a lot of people who have left their faith, and what I've learned is that on average, it actually takes a bit of time to deconstruct, months, years, people are even in it. Truly, it was a matter for me. And I think it was because of my experience in college, right? I can look back and be like, whoa, I was really having questions even back then, even though I wasn't engaging in them or acknowledging them. It was literally a matter of weeks where this was my whole life. I believed everything to nothing. I deconstructed
you gave them
it all.
You gave them a year too. You made an internal agreement, and I tell people life is a series of what I call statement of faith, meaning that that individual believes it. He or she will say it, and sometimes it's just a quick thing, but they believe it so much so that it already has it's been sown, that seed deposited, and it grew for 1 year, and you were just waiting to see what he would do. And so that seed had blossomed as well, because within that year, it kept growing as you kept seeing all this madness come forth. And so by the time he did that, internally, you were ready. You were there. You were like, okay, this is the final thing that I needed to see. But you had a year of preparation. As he kept saying all the craziest things, you were already solidifying that statement of faith that you made. And then when it was time, it says, the Bible always says, in the fullness of time, you will act. And so in the fullness of time, with that one statement that's all you needed at that point in time. And right there, you were gone. There's no way you would ever be able to go back in there, because you had made that statement of faith. You made that statement, you believed it, and you were just giving him the due as you said he would. And once the fullness of time came and he made that statement, you were free.
That's interesting to think about it that way. What I didn't anticipate was leaving the whole system altogether. That was truly never something that ever came into my mind.
Yeah.
That was quite a shock to me and to my community and to my friends and to my family. So
that's all you knew, but you were questioning for a mighty long time. Even in college, you were questioning. And so you were familiar with that perception as you were clashing with theirs. And at that time, I believe, listening to your story, it came clearly to me was that it was the fullness of time, because you started way back in college.
Wow.
And You were managing yourself, watching the crazy behavior, making your decisions. And once you made that statement of faith, it was an internal thing that you had declared, an internal belief that you had declared. It wasn't just him, you were giving the whole system a year. Because when you said that to him, you gave the system a year, because all of that was a part of the system. And so when you gave the system that year, and it didn't, they didn't make the adjustment, which they couldn't because that's their system. You would then have to leave that system because you don't identify with that system anymore. That belief system is not yours. So to stay there, you would die.
Yeah, and that's an important part of my story because, see, a lot of people like to say to me, well, gosh, you left this entire system that you loved and believed in just because of one bad egg, is how they like to see it. But you're right in that, actually, I can look back 15 years, right, and see that my body was telling me something is wrong, something is wrong, something is wrong. And that has been true for much longer than that gentleman was preaching. And you're right. It was just time. It was when I had done enough. I had experienced enough. I felt safe enough. I felt strong enough, right? Because the system is set up so that you don't leave because there are severe consequences. And I suffered a lot of them when you leave or when you question. And so at the end of the day, I'm incredibly proud of myself and grateful for the wisdom of my body and spirit that was saying, we're not going to do this anymore because the system is not set up to allow people to do that. And it's incredibly difficult when you finally make that decision.
When you made that decision and you find yourself sitting at your place on a Sunday and you realize, what am I, where do I go? Talk to us about that, because you are now dissociating yourself from an entire system that's all you knew. So how did this newfound separation, if you will, how did you manage yourself within that? Because that is an interesting story that I want to hear.
You know, initially I would have these Sundays and Sunday mornings where I wasn't getting up and going to church. And I thought, this is wonderful. Is this what it's like to not have to go somewhere out of obligation? Are other people in the world just enjoying their Sundays and doing what they want to do? That was, of course, weird at first and then incredibly liberating because I recognized how much of my life I was living out of obligation, truly because it was what I was supposed to do and what was right to do. In those early weeks and months, I felt incredible freedom. I couldn't stop talking about it. I had 2 roommates at the time, and I was learning all these things and I wanted to share, and I wanted people to believe me. I felt that I was experiencing an awakening. I was finally awake, and I was finally understanding that, whoa, everything's a construct. And whoa, like basic just human behavioral things. And that this system had given me security and safety for all these years, but doesn't mean it's true, whatever that means, right? And there are other ways of thinking, like what a concept. And there's other ways of being in the world. And I talked about it nonstop. And I wanted to convince people. See, I was still evangelizing even after I wasn't an evangelical. That was my natural state of being. I wanted to bring people to my side. I can look back and, oh gosh. And so I encountered a lot of relational challenges. I told people that I left very slowly over time. So I'd tell one person, because the response was not great. And so that was incredibly difficult. Again, as a leader, I had mentored and led a lot of these people. And it was, I think, incredibly destabilizing to them to see this person that they had put on a pedestal as kind of this godly woman to look up to and strive after, to see her leave and question and say, I actually don't believe any of that anymore. And so it was very challenging in that way. I could not stop learning. I probably listened to hours of podcasts a day. I couldn't get enough information because for 30 years, it had been not allowed. I wasn't allowed to read these things or watch these things or listen to these things. So it was an incredible season of learning. And what happened very shortly after was that I became extremely far left liberal.
Mm-hmm.
And I can look back now and see that I went from one system that told me how to think and be and believe. And then here I was in this limbo of what does it all mean? And what do I believe? And you're kind of just floating in space.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just found another system to tell me how to think
Yeah.
or believe. And so it was this interesting season of feeling lost in space in a way that was free, but also scary and lonely.
Yeah.
And then quickly finding another group of people to belong to because, my human brain couldn't handle that. So there was a lot there that happened very quickly, where my brain felt like she was trying to catch up to the world and everything that had been shut off to her. And I had to learn that, there is wisdom within myself to be found. And I don't need a system, whether it's religion or politics, to tell me how to live my life. And that was a lesson that I had to learn going through that.
I think that place that you found yourself, a lot of people are there, and that's where you have people that are, you see them today, that the young men are being pulled into the extreme because they are in that limbo. And they were there, they came out of one system, and then they, as you said, they're in this limbo, and they had a little time, and they were on the internet, and another extreme grabbed them and ushered them into another form of belief system that some of them never come out of. So you're able to come out, and here you are. You're out now. You've got a chance to swing on that pendulum, and you're all
come
over.
Back to the middle, hopefully.
So now you're here, and as that ball, the force comes and hits the ball, and then the ball comes and it's centered. So talk to us now that you're here and this centered, and you have the ball is in the center, and then you have both belief system on your side, and you're standing there in the middle. How did you manage and navigate now to try and create essentially a new belief system, one of that you would call your own belief system that fits your skin, that you wear you put on that jacket of this new system and it's comfortable. How did you create that new system, and where did you get the tools from to help you create that system that you are now part of?
I continued to, even when I was in that kind of far left camp, I continued to learn. And I actually really enjoyed people challenging my belief system. And I had been really closed off to men prior to this. Part of that was being raised in purity culture. And I grew up in the height of that. After I left, I decided to do some online dating. And it was actually, I never even met a couple of these people in person, but it was actually through conversations with some men that I had met online. And I was very vocal about my far left beliefs, and they challenged me. They're like, Melissa, Melissa. And they would send me links, podcasts, YouTube videos to watch and to listen to. And what I realized was I was, again, just allowing myself to be spoon fed. I just tell me what's right. Tell me what's right. Tell me what's wrong. And I recognized in myself, I truly lacked critical thinking skills, right? Because when you're in that evangelical Christianity, that's not okay. You just believe what they tell you. And I realized that I didn't actually know how to think for myself, and that I was falling for some of these tricks of the media and these sound bites. And it felt good to be outraged about all of these topics and opinions. And so I'm so thankful that these men were brave enough to challenge me. And even saying that, I'm like, oh, such an unpopular opinion for a woman to say, right? That it was a man that helped her see some of these things. But that's the truth. And I'm ashamed to say that. And I'm grateful for them. And so once I recognized my own weaknesses, that's really what it was. I realized that I had weaknesses in my thinking and the way that I see the world. I decided that I had spent so long believing that there was a right and wrong way to be and to believe. And that, like I mentioned earlier, that was so natural to my personality. That's my natural bent in the world, that I wanted my spiritual practice to be that I don't want to say believed in nothing, but that I was going to practice not knowing what was right and wrong. I was going to practice, what is it like to live in the gray? What is it like to say, I don't have all the answers. I don't know. I'm learning. And it was deeply uncomfortable at first, very contrary to my personality. And I think even just as humans, we want answers to those big life questions.
Yeah.
But I knew that I wanted to challenge myself to not have all the answers and to be okay with being uncomfortable in the unknown. And to be honest with you, I'm still in that space, and it's unpopular. I'm in Eugene, Oregon, a very liberal place, and it's unpopular to say, I'm still learning. I'm still learning, what do these terms that we use so freely mean? And once I settled into that space of I don't have all the answers, even more freedom was found there. My system regulated. I emotionally regulated. My relationships got better. I looked at people with curiosity instead of judgment. And I try to learn from everyone that I meet. What do you think the meaning of life is? And what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? And recognizing that I spent the majority of my life with a very little tiny bit of information. And so sometimes it still feels wrong or uncomfortable to say, I don't know what my beliefs are. But I went through a specific practice of identifying my core values. And I realized, no, there are things that are important to me. And I do hold values to be true. And so I had to find some stability in that season. And I did that through my core values and what's important to me as a person. And so that gave me a little bit of foundation to be able to continue to live kind of in this gray area that I'm still in, happily, actually.
Well, that's a good place to be, I think. And I prefer to be in that area and live from that area because it gives me access to knowledge, and it gives me the opportunity to become I say one-dimensional people are boring to me. It makes you sparkle in a way because, I think the fact that you're inquisitive, and that's why I mentioned that scripture to you, Come Let's Reason Together. It's one of my favorites because it gives me permission to think, it gives me permission to ask questions, it gives me permission to delve deep into the unknown. And digging deep into the unknown is going inward because that is where the unknown is. And as I go deeper into the unknown, I find myself, I come out and go, wow, you are a little more expensive and more beautiful than yesterday. And I get a chance to see who I am, and I learn from me, I laugh with me, we have the best time. And so as you are on this path now, how did it guide you now to create the program that is you today? How did those core values that you located after coming out of both extremes, you're here in the middle, you've learned how to balance your mind, you are living in the gray, as you said, asking, giving yourself permission to ask and to delve and to learn, and you're here. And then how did the thought come? Where did you think it came from? And how did you navigate to create the program?
The program, my coaching program, or my own program as me? My coaching program?
Yeah, it is you.
Yes, it is me. You're right.
Yeah.
I had a therapist. Well, I still have a therapist. I had two coaches I was working with in particular, a somatic coach as well as a business coach and mentor. And I knew that through the deconstruction process, those years, I discovered my purpose and my calling was to coach women. And in fact, that's what I'd always done, but I had done it in a system that caused that to be very unhealthy and harmful. And so I realized that that still was what I wanted to do, and that I could do it from a place that was more honoring of people and their own innate wisdom, as opposed to me telling them how to live their lives. And the question that these women asked me is, what are you an expert in? And what do you know? The real question was, actually, one of these coaches was, if you were to write a book, what would it be about? And what I love about coaching is that, therapists have this education and they have this wide range of knowledge that they are skilled in. And coaches may not have that wide of an education or understanding, but they are experts in their little field, right? They're experts in this little niche area that they can really excel in. And mine is navigating tremendous life changes. And one of the things that I'm proud of, that I alluded to earlier, was my ability to, some relationships needed to fall away, right? After leaving, because they were not healthy. But some relationships I desperately wanted to stay in, my family, close friends. And I had to learn, right? I was like, my therapist helped me understand, I really was truly like a cult survivor. I had to relearn some basic social and relational skills that I wasn't taught. And I had to learn these skills to navigate and stay in these relationships with people that now had radically different worldviews than me. And in fact, thought that the way I was living was wrong, essentially, right? And I am so thankful that I found my own teachers and coaches that helped me learn how to do that. And I want to share that with the world. I think, again, I mentioned that we live in a place that's becoming increasingly divisive. And it's important to me that I contribute to the world in a way that helps us become closer together and not further apart. And I understand very intimately what it's like to be another way and to have that way of thinking. And one of my core beliefs that I came out of this season was that we are all doing the best we can with the skills and resources available to us. And to not see people as walking around with an agenda to be judgmental or be hurtful or to be harmful, and that they're really doing the best they can, as I am and you are, and we're doing the best we can with what we've got. And the skills and the learnings, right? Navigating grief and the loss that comes from leaving a system and a community, and feeling alone and finding your own way and tapping into yourself, into your inner wisdom and guidance, and building some of these essential skills to stay in relationship, to have meaningful connection, and to be comfortable living in the gray. That's something I know how to do. Right. And that's something that I spent years in developing and learning, and the resources and the sharing. And that's how my program started to take shape. What do I know? What have I learned? What do I wish I had known? What do I wish I had help with? What were those pain points? How can I help others find themselves and give them loving permission to question, and give them loving permission to say, I want this and I don't want that. And to find their way and experience the range of emotions and yet stay in relationship with others. And I'm really proud of that and excited to offer that to the world.
Everyone, this has been such a beautiful story. I mean, it's powerful in so many ways. Many of you that are listening to us are in a similar situation. And here you have Melissa, who paint you a beautiful picture of her life, the pendulums that she was moving through, and how she was able to then learn her center. And once she located that, she then began to check into her values, and then she began to formulate the things that she has gained from her journey and put it in a format by which now she can serve you, to help you to get to the center so that you can find your core values so that you can create also your little dream that is residing within you. That thing has been there before you came to this earth. The contract was before you were born, I knew you. And so that means that if he knew you, he has some stuff for you to do. You are good quality stuff, but it's kind of inside there, and you have relationships that hide it. You have pressure, you have stress, you have all these things that are hiding you in there. Melissa is talking about she has been operating in her gift all her life. She just didn't find her place where it would become fruitful, where it would become powerful. And you may be the same. But here is a person in the name of Melissa, housed in that body that has been through this extreme so that she can be here to be a vital part of your team to assist you so that you cannot go to those extremes. She knows the questions to ask you, to bring you to your center. She knows what it takes to get you centered. I implore you guys to get in touch with her, get to her site. I will provide all of that. Get into her space, get into her class, and learn and become centered so that you can find you and the power that is you. Melissa, thank you for coming to Threads of Enlightenment. This has been enriching in so many ways.
Thank you, Ken. I appreciate your kindness and wisdom. I've learned so much from you this morning, and I'm really grateful that we were able to share this time together. I'll carry it with me throughout my week.
Thank you.